Code for South Africa is a civic technology company. Well, we're an NGO, and our sort of tagline is promoting informed decision making. So how do you help people make better decisions about where to send their children to school, or the quality of their water, who they should vote for, and what the quality of their healthcare is. So there we go. One of the things that we really push is data, and we show people that data is really interesting, and when you make an informed decision, you really need to base it on data. So here are just some interesting things that came out of the census. Now, the census is the granddaddy of data sets in South Africa, at least public data sets, and most people don't use it. They don't really understand it, but here's some interesting stuff that's come out of it. So according to the 2011 census, 100,000 households owned a satellite dish, but no refrigerator. 20 households live in a tent or a caravan, but earn over 2.5 million rand annually. 23,000 15 to 19-year-olds have degrees, and 933 of them have masters or PhDs, which is pretty cool. There are 47,000 10 to 14-year-olds who are married, and 789 of them got divorced. So these are interesting things. This is not, this is the sort of thing that you wouldn't expect, and you wouldn't know about South Africa, but these are some interesting things that come out of it when you look at data. So here's an example of probably one of the most boring data sets you can imagine. It's a 789 PDF file, and it looks like this. Every row here represents a candidate for the national and provincial elections in 2009, and 789 pages of this. I don't know why anyone created a PDF file that looked like that, but there are a whole bunch of fields here. There's a name, there's a surname. What's really cool there's an ID number, and I don't think we would release that sort of thing these days after Poppy, but the ID number is really cool, because what is the first thing that comes to mind when you have an ID number? What are the star signs of politicians? Obviously, right? So I did an analysis to see, are Gemini more likely to become politicians or not? And I was really, really surprised that there was absolutely no relationship whatsoever. But, okay, what are ID numbers good for? Date of birth and gender. The first 6 digits are the date of birth. The next 4 digits are your gender. What can we do with that? Well, have a look at this the scatter plot. Every bubble there is a political party. The size of the bubble represents the number of candidates they're fielding. So obviously, bigger parties have more candidates. Smaller parties have fewer candidates. From left to right, that's the age, the median age of the party. So young parties on the left, older parties on the right. And then the y-axis is the gender equality. So there's that dashed line. Any party below that has less than 50% of the candidates are women, and above it's over 50%. You can look at the top left. Clearly, women forward are over there. They're not 100%, by the way. There's one lowly man in the party. But there are two things that I find quite interesting. Firstly, look at the ANC and the DA. They're pretty big bubbles. They're one on top of the other. But you can see that the ANC seems to have a gender equality policy because it's 49% women and 50% men. Whereas the DA, despite being led by Helen Zille, it's mostly a bunch of older men. Look at the bottom right. There's Freedom Front Plus and Al Jamar. So it just so happens that these two parties, who you'd imagine would never sit around the same campfire, end up, they're basically a bunch of old men sitting in the far right corner. So 30 seconds, you get a landscape of what's going on in South African politics, and that's on the basis of this file. Sometimes you just need to be creative to look at data. This is something interesting. On the Department of Health website, actually sort of a sub-website that no one links to, there's a list of all the medicines that are registered in South Africa and the prices of those medicines. So medicine prices are regulated, so there's a maximum amount that you should be paying, and on top of that, the pharmacist is allowed to charge a dispensing fee. I think there are around 15,000 registered medicines in the country. The thing is, when you go to your pharmacy, you're not going to be carrying your laptop and an Excel spreadsheet with you. So how is this beneficial to most people? So we developed a mobile website where you type in the name of your medicine and it'll list the price, the maximum price you should be paying. And it also shows you alternatives, cheaper alternatives. So for instance, if you look at Lamictal, which is a chronic med, It costs 800 Rand a month, which is a lot of money. But if you look at the generics, you'll see the cheapest generic is 200, and then there's another one which is 400. So this is the sort of thing we can actually help people make better decisions by typing in their medicine and finding a cheaper meds. Now, I'm guessing most people in this audience are middle class. Certainly in my case, it would be great to save a few bucks, but it's not a huge deal. But this actually really affects poorer people, people who are on the border between using public healthcare and private healthcare. And so this is the sort of thing that can actually mean the difference between getting medicines and not getting medicines. So I don't know if you guys know, but the best way to debug your software is to demo it live, of course. The other way, the other thing that's really interesting is the best way to find out who your users are is when you break your website. So we broke our website, and 30 minutes later, I received this email from a doctor saying, very disappointed that you've taken the site down. I work in a mixed income neighborhood, and being able to figure out what works for my patients' budgets is extremely helpful. There's no point in prescribing medicines that the patient cannot afford. So this is great. I've got one guy using my tool, and he's actually making a difference. That, for me, was just like one of those chilling moments. I mean, we have more people, but that was actually a pretty cool thing. What's interesting, though, is sometimes it's really difficult to get data in South Africa. So there's something called the Promotion of Access to Information Act, and it follows the Constitution, which says that every South African has the right to have access to information held by the state. There's also some provision for private sector. So you fill in a PIA form, and you submit it to a government department, and the theory is that you get the data. So I requested all of the tender awards for the City of Cape Town from August to December of 2013. I got this rejection letter, which I love and I cherish, which says that I regret to inform that your request for copies of tenders awarded between January to August 2013 is hereby refused on the basis of sections 45B and 34A. Well, 34.1. What is 45B? The request is manifestly frivolous or vexatious, or substantial and unreasonable diversion of resources. The other one is that, I'm essentially going to be diverting resources from the government. That, for me, is pretty interesting. I just want to know where my money is being spent, and I essentially got the middle finger, which is interesting. For me, it's encouraging. It means that it's a bit of a fight, more so than, if they just rolled over and gave me the data, it would be a lot more boring. In fact, a while back, I started a website, pleasesueme.co.za. And basically what I did was an e-commerce website, and I took government data, which I thought should be public, and I had basically wrapped it up, and you could add it to cart and buy it for $20. I decided, you know what, let's wait for another time. So I took it down. Another thing is that, hey, I'm not scared of a fight. I just thought, now is not the time. So another thing is, data could be really useful even at the public sector level. What we did is we collected procurement prices from 15 SADC member states. So this is the public sector. Governments are buying medicines for public clinics. And so here's an example of a tender award for South Africa. Basically, it's a whole bunch of medicines. What can you do with that? Well, we put them all together and we compared them. And for the first time ever, countries could, in Africa could compare, or in Southern Africa, could compare the prices that they're getting with those of their neighbors. And there was one really interesting example where we gave just literally an Excel spreadsheet, and one of the rows was bolded, and we gave those are the South African prices, and we gave them to Botswana. And we showed them that they were overpaying for one medicine in particular, which was South Africa, the exact same box, the same company. South Africa was paying 10 Rand a pack, and Botswana was paying 99 Rand a pack. And literally, they pick up the phone and they phone the supplier and said, about that price, they saved 10 million pula a year, which worked out to $1.5 million US. And that literally is a data geek going to tender documents and pulling out some data and handing it to the right people. So data is really powerful, and you don't need to do very much to actually make that change. Right. Here's a tool that we published last year around domestic worker salaries. We published it on Media 24. Had an amazing response. So what we asked is, how much do you pay your domestic worker? And what you do is you type in how much you pay on a daily basis or a monthly basis, and based on some research we gave you, we said that you are covering, in this case, 94% of that household's minimal need. But most people said rubbish, right? I don't believe any of that data. So you see at the bottom, this show assumptions. You click that button, and it shows you all of our assumptions. Basically, it's sliders. So how much does it cost to get 2,000 calories a day? So at the time, it was, I think, 27 Rand per person per day just to get, sort of a high-starch, non-banting diet. But most people don't want to exploit the domestic workers. So they think, you know what, I think, let's add some eggs and some chicken to that basket because I think, people shouldn't be eating pup all day long. So you could change the slider to 40 Rand and how much does it cost for transport and education and housing and all that sort of good stuff. And when you get down to the bottom, you recalculate, and then the real number comes up. And it's, oh my God, I can't believe it. I can't believe that I should be, or this household, to actually live a decent life is going to cost 8,000 Rand. What is the overwhelming response of the Media 24 commenters? It wasn't favorable. They were basically saying that we're advocating for increasing minimum wage, etc. But in the first 2 days, we got 50,000 users. There were around 350 very angry comments, and I went in, donned my hazmat suit, and went into the comments, and I responded to everyone. And there's upvotes and downvotes. There'd be like one upvote and like 300 downvotes. And at some point, people were saying, you do know that downvote is bad. But I thought it was actually quite important to give a balanced view. And someone says, well, I shouldn't pay her a decent salary because she steals the sugar. Yeah, that didn't make sense. This is something that's pretty cool. It came out just after the budget speech. Where does your money go, your tax money go? You type in your salary, and it's a calendar. So it says right now you are working to pay off the education budget or health or whatever the case is. It starts off from 9 o'clock. We assume people start at 9 o'clock because we're Cape Townians, so we start at 9. Well, actually, not in my office. We start at 1:15. But the first 15 to 20 minutes, you're just working off South Africa's debt, which is crazy. So you're busy having your morning coffee, and you look at this thing like, oh my God, I'm just paying interest now. But it is very interesting because you see throughout the day there's a calendar, there's one of those red lines that goes through and shows you, oh right, so now I'm paying for education. The next 15 minutes I'm paying for health, or the next 30 seconds I'm paying for higher education, and whatever the case is. So that was pretty cool. We also produced something, again, with the budget, which was basically showing that people could, after the budget speech, it's not finished, it's actually just started. You still have an opportunity for public comments. And this was a tool to help people draft a letter to the Appropriations Committee to say, actually, this is what I think the budget should look like. Some of the other stuff we do is a bit more serious. We helped an organization called the Parliamentary Monitoring Group to make available terabytes of data online, 17 years of parliamentary monitoring. There were 18,000 minutes of meetings, thousands of hours of audio recordings, 300 gigabytes of documents, and a heck of a lot more. And so you could say that we built a website, or you could say that we actually made available a lot of South Africa's history on a website in an easy accessible format. And that sort of thing. I mean, this website gets probably around 6,000, 7,000 users a day. What I couldn't imagine why you'd want to go there, but clearly, a whole bunch of other people love it. Some of the stuff is really geeky and really nerdy, but it turns out that there are all sorts of geeks. It's not just code geeks. There are law geeks. Who would have thought? Our lead developer really geeked out on actually finding bylaws and digitizing them, putting them online. And you got other people really excited. So they had a Law Liberation Day. They went to Durban, and a whole bunch of people spent a Saturday finding laws and digitizing them. That sort of thing is really useful. You should see the letters that we get every day. People, things that we can't answer, but there's a shebeen down the road, and they make a loud noise, and the broken bottles, etc. So there's a huge need for this sort of thing. We usually refer them to the various places, but a lot of this information is extremely important. Many people think that data is this high-tech thing. There's just a data group of people, and only they could use it. Here's an example of a project we worked on with Black Sash. So Black Sash, if you know, was a whole bunch of old tunnies during apartheid, including Helen Zille, protesting apartheid, and now they've moved towards promoting social justice. Here's an example of a group of people from a specific community sitting with, as you can see, an infographic, and using that as talking points when they sat with the Department of Health or the social services agency, and saying, well, it's actually not okay that we're waiting 6 hours in a queue. And it's not just me picketing and saying, oh no, I spent 6 hours in a queue. We have 500 people who said that. So that's data. That's really powerful data. And the technology is fantastic, right? Paper doesn't run out of batteries, doesn't need reception. It's pretty cheap. And so sometimes technology could be as simple as something like that. One of the most exciting things that we started with this year is our Data Journalism Academy. So basically, we're trying to drag journalists kicking and screaming into the 21st century. And you saw yesterday or the day before the Panama Papers that came out. Old school journalists could never handle that. We helped a group of African journalists work on analyzing that 2.5 terabytes worth of data and finding the sorts of stories that they found. And that's really getting journalists who've never seen an Excel spreadsheet before start to do things like pivot tables and sorting and all sorts of interesting stuff. Just going back to how boring data could be interesting, just imagine looking at the financial statements of municipalities. Who reads that? So I was quite interested in looking at revenue. Where does the money come from? And here's an example of one of the line items is fines. And I was quite surprised that fines was actually budgeted for. This year we're going to get like 50 million rands worth of fines. So what can you do with that? Well, how about you look at all the municipalities on the N1 and you look to see how much money they're earning in fines. So if this little diagram over here, that's the N1. On the right-hand side is Joburg, on the left-hand side is Joburg, on the right-hand side is Cape Town. The size of the bubble is how much more of the national average does that particular municipality earn in fines. So if you look at Gauteng, you go through Joburg, small bubble, get into the Free State, cool, you can drive 200 k's an hour, no one's going to stop you. You hit the Northern Cape, you hit Ubuntu municipality, 49% of all of their income comes from fines. 49%, that's huge. It's 2,300 rand for every man, woman, and child in that municipality. And only 25% of them own cars. That really sucks for people living in Ubuntu municipality. So we published this on Times Live, and the article there was, so the headline there was, Drive Safely, Bankrupt a Municipality, which I thought was pretty interesting, because this 49% is more than rates, water, electricity, sewage, and refuse removal put together. So there's some interesting stuff that you get from something like that. I've got 1 minute 41 seconds, so I'm just going to go through this quickly. How about marriages? What do we know about marriages in South Africa? Take the stats data, put it on a scatter plot, and you see some amazing things. Look at the bottom right, it's a tiny little dot. It says, shame on you. Sorry. First, the x-axis is the age of the bride. On the left is younger woman. On the right is older woman. On the y-axis, the age of the groom. Younger men at the bottom, older men at the top. You can see, so there's two diagonal lines. I just defined sugar daddies and sugar mommies, if there's an age difference of 20 years. You can clearly see on the top left, those are the sugar daddies. There are way more sugar daddies than sugar mommies. Look at the bottom right there. There's this outlier dot. It says, you can't read the writing, it says, shame on you, he could be your great-grandson. This is an 86-year-old woman who married a 16-year-old boy. Crazy. I didn't know that sort of thing was even legal. It turns out that it is, actually. If you are younger than 18 as a boy or younger than 16 as a girl, you can get married with your parents' permission and the consent of the Minister of Home Affairs. Who would have thought that these two, stood in front of the Minister of Home Affairs and says, we love each other? 30 seconds, there we go. This is Code for SA Central. We're under the Claremont Bridge. Most people don't know that when we say this is, these are the directions under the bridge, most people don't get there, which is pretty interesting. So I've been taking a tally to see how many people are actually getting there. We're probably getting around 70% these days, which means our directions are getting better. I've got 7 seconds, so I'm going to finish my presentation here. So you can just have a quick squiz through our slides. There we go. So Code for South Africa, you can get us on Twitter at codeforsa.org, info@codeforsa.org. Basically, the take-home message that I wanted to get you guys to to think about is data is really interesting, not just big data, not just analyzing how do we get more money out of retail, retail consumers. It's also about how do we change lives, how do we change policies. And also, working in the civil society, NGO sector is not boring. You're not volunteering your time. You're earning a salary. You're actually doing really, really interesting things. So I think this is a very exciting space, and I'd really urge people to start thinking about this and say, you know what, we don't just want to build websites where you get people to buy stuff. We're also working on really cool technology to actually improve South Africa and make it a better place. Cool. Thank you.